All right, hello. It is September 1st and it is Labor Day 2025. And this is a time when it's, one of the big American holidays. Except for the diehard fans, which I know that I have. You're probably sleeping in right now, and it's well deserved. This is a day to celebrate labor, and it should be. It should be a day to celebrate labor, but we need to think beyond, and that's what I'm going to be doing in this show. We need to think beyond the barbecues, which are great, and the baseball games, which are great, the football games, which are great, the U.S. Open tennis, which are great, and all the other entertainments that we're able to do, and all the other blessings of liberty, and the blessings of that people really, and that we just absolutely, positively must not forget, that people bled for, that people sweated for, that people suffered for, and yes, that people died for. These blessings and benefits that we have, like the 40-hour work week, lunch breaks, paid vacations, all the rest, these did not come without blood, sweat, tears, and suffering. And we have to remember that, and we have to understand that the old opponents of labor, and I'm just talking about white-collar, blue-collar guys who are out there listening to the show, people who sell their time for money. That's what I'm talking about. But the old enemies of labor are out there, and they are wanting to institute a corporatist state. Their intention is absolutely, positively, and entirely to create this. That's what's being done. This is what FDR warned about in 1936. This is what Mussolini said in the early 30s when he said, if fascism is not corporatist, it is nothing. That is exactly what it is. So these are things you need to be aware of, and these are things you need to know. Things have not stopped. All is not well. The old enemies are still out there. They are indefatigable. To use an expression, they are the loyal opposition. And they never quit, and they never will quit. So on this Labor Day, we have to keep aware of that. And with all the other things that we do, the great celebrations, having a great summer here in the United States, we also have to remember these things as well. And I'm going to kind of start the show, well, I already have started the show, haven't I, with a comment that I made with regard to what FDR said. And I'll just go ahead and make that now. In 1936, at the Democratic National Convention, he said this. He said, out of this modern civilization, economic royalists carved new dynasties. New kingdoms were built upon concentration of control over material things. Through new uses of corporations, banks, and securities, new machinery of industry and agriculture, of labor and capital, that were all undreamed of by the fathers, the whole structure of modern life was impressed into this royal service. The privileged princes of these new economic dynasties, thirsting for power, reached out for control over government itself. They created a new despotism and wrapped it in the robes of legal sanction. In its service, new mercenaries sought to regiment the people, their labor, and their property. And as a result, the average man once more confronts the problem that faced the Minutemen. And of course, the Minutemen were those of the Revolution, so called because they could load and fire a musket 3 times in a minute. This is how serious FDR felt that this is, and it's how serious I feel it is now, and it's entirely apropos. All right, so going on. The hours men and women work, the wages they receive, the conditions of their labor, these had passed beyond the control of the people and were now imposed by this new industrial dictatorship. The savings of the average family, the capital of the small businessman, the investments of the average investor, these were tools which the new economic royalists used to control the lives of all the people. And against economic tyranny such as this, The American citizen could appeal only to the organized power of government. The collapse of 1929 showed up that despotism for what it was. The liberty of a democracy, he said, is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in essence, is fascism. Ownership of government by an individual, by a group, or by any other controlling private power. And as I said then, I say now, the important thing about this is that at that time, FDR wasn't talking about Mussolini's black shirts. He wasn't talking about Hitler's rallies, but he was aimed squarely. His remarks were aimed squarely at the Wall Street barons, the monopolists in our own country, who, in his view, wanted to capture government for their own profit. So, all right, let's go on now more to the present. The intention is to create, as I said at the beginning of the show, a corporate state. That's what's being done. And so, in other words, if you insist, and you've heard me talk about this character, Zoran Kwame Mamdani. He's the leading candidate for the mayoralty of New York City. And he's, you would have to describe him as an ultra-left. And I am not for those guys. And in the course of the show, and I've explained it before in other shows, I will explain to you why I am not for this. But he's the leading candidate, Democratic candidate for mayor of New York City. And if you vote for him, who knows? The corporatist state could be consolidated by the end of the year. Like I said, I'll explain more about this because it's important to know. But, if you want to stick to reasonable candidates, there are such people. There are people like Gavin Newsom, and these people are being attacked, and their states are being attacked as well. That's one of the things that Trump is doing now. He's working to federalize states on the premise that there's an emergency. He always wants to declare an emergency. He always wants to say that the states are out of control, and so the federal government has to step in. This is all a charade. This is a canard. This is phony baloney. It gives him an opportunity to actually stop the elections in 2026, which is something that we'll talk about on the show too today, if I get the chance. You've heard me say before, the worry is not 2028. The worry is 2026. So, all right, let's just talk about that a little bit. You have Gavin Newsom. He's strongly against Trump. Trump hates California. He hates Gavin Newsom. Why? Because Gavin Newsom won't roll over for Trump like his cabinet will in the loyalty pageant. I've got a short on YouTube and on Facebook about, it's entitled Trump's Loyalty Pageant. I recommend that you listen to it. Recently, in June of 2025, Newsom strongly denounced Trump's military deployment in Los Angeles. It violates posse comitatus, which is the use of federal troops against the citizenry. This was, he called it illegal, immoral, unconstitutional. I absolutely think it is. And if you stand up against Trump like this, he's going to come after you. He's led a lawsuit, Newsom v. Trump, to reclaim state control over the National Guard, arguing that Trump had overstepped federal authority. He framed Trump's deployment of federal troops to Democratic cities as an assault on democracy. He warned that it was a dangerously authoritarian and filing legal action in response. Newsom also rallied with 18 Democratic governors to condemn the politicization of the military, citing national security, state sovereignty as cornerstones of democratic government. He's also talking about withholding the $82 billion because California is a giver state. It gives back to the federal government more than it takes. And he's using the economic power of California, which is the fourth strongest economy in the entire world. And he's talking about withholding those monies from the Trump gang, the Trump regime, the Trump cabal, masquerading, which is controlling and overtaken the federal government. And Trump doesn't like that. So, okay, then we've got J.B. Pritzker of Illinois. During the State of the State address, Pritzker invoked the chilling speed of historical tyranny. It was a great speech. I recommend that you go look it up. He quoted the Nazis' rise to power as a cautionary analogy for Trump's politics. I agree. He warned that authoritarian systems are built incrementally and that current political tactics point down that path. Amen. In response to Trump's plans to deploy the National Guard to Chicago, Pritzker joined Chicago's Mayor Johnson in resisting the move, calling it unconstitutional encroachment on local authority and a potential crisis instigator. And he's emerged as a nationally vocal Democrat, a leader pushing back against Trump, including supporting anti-Trump protests. And he does not varnish his opinion, which is to say he is unstinting in his criticism of Trump as a little man who is not wanted and who is not needed. Okay, and finally we have Phil Murphy of Connecticut. Although not as heavily covered in the sources, Murphy has criticized Trump's expansion of executive power, calling it an attempt to seize control of power for corrupt purposes. The user-submitted commentary reflects broader concerns among Connecticut's leaders and citizens about unchecked power and democratic erosion. And at this point, let's take a break. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake to tell you you're not crazy. The system is rigged. Help us say it louder, won't you? Join us at patreon.com/Politics by Jake. Okay, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And once again, happy Labor Day to you all. And I want to do a little bit of a digression here. I've got a short up, they're called shorts, on YouTube, but I also got it up on Facebook. And it's called Trump's Loyalty Pageant, Fear and Loathing in D.C. And it's about the August 26th cabinet meeting at which Trump televised, and no president in living memory has ever done something like this before. And basically what it is, it's a loyalty pageant of cabinet officers to take their turn around the table and talk while Trump sits there and just basks in it and soaks it in, talked about how great he is, how messianic, how transformational, how lucky they are, how America is back on the right trip, on the right step because of Trump. And this is all just the worst kind of propaganda. This is spectacle masquerading as governance. Policies are not being talked about here. Just praise of the dear leader is being talked about. This is an awful and awesome thing to have to bring to you and report to you, but this is what's happening. You need to be aware of it. The inner circle, the ones who do this, the people like the cabinet officers, for whatever reason, whether because of fear or loathing, or because they're true believers, or because they're hybrids, which is to say they do it for some for one reason and some for another, all in the same thing, they are the ones as much as any who cement in Trump, who is mentally diseased in his mind and has been since he was 5 years old, the idea of his own greatness, his own transformational quality, as opposed to really what it is, which is destructive. It is a destroying quality. And even his messianic status. These are the people of his inner circle, and they are just as dangerous in their own way as Hitler's inner circle. And it's just extremely important to be aware of this, because this may look like nothing, but it is. It's a masquerade. It's government masquerade. It's actually a great danger, because they are enforcing upon Trump his own delusion, including messianism and grandiosity. If Shakespeare was describing this, he would describe the phrase that is deposited upon Trump as fulsome praise. And fulsome does not mean what you would think it would mean. It means disgusting. We see too much, over the top, not to be believed. We see this in Othello. We see it in King Lear, when King Lear calls his three daughters together and wants them to each stand forth in their turn. And he wants to hear how much each one of them loves him and who loves him the most. And in this rambling, maniacal soliloquy that was part of this August 26th cabinet meeting, Trump basically described himself, at least in so many words, that he thinks that he's the CEO of America. And he said, I have the right to do anything what I want. These childish statements, these are the province of fourth grade school plays. He can't do anything that he wants. In order to do something, he has to have legal authority. He has to have statutory authority, regulatory authority. He has to have custom and tradition. But he does not absolutely, positively have the right to do whatever he wants. And yet this is what he said. And I encourage you to go to this cabinet meeting. It's on C-SPAN. And as I said, the frightening thing about this is these cabinet officers who have really been relegated to mere courtiers, mere sycophants, said amen and went right along with it. And that's the fear and loathing that I'm talking about. So, all right. So what does he want? Well, as we just started talking about, but I'm digressing on this because I want to get this in because this actually plays into it. We started talking about he wants a corporatist state. And of course, Trump wants to be the president now even of the Federal Reserve, it seems. And the Federal Reserve is talked about as an independent agency. It's never been independent. It's run by bankers. Trump, true to what I said before about him thinking that he can do whatever he wants now to horn in on the bankers. And actually, that should be interesting. It should be interesting to watch that unfold. He's attempted to fire one of the governors recently. That governor is now suing the administration. And this will be interesting because he's horning in on their game. And I don't think the bankers are going to like it. All right, so getting back to what we were talking about, I think that Pritzker, I think Murphy of Connecticut, Pritzker of Illinois, and of course Trump wants to go after Illinois now too. He wants to send federal troops into Illinois. He wants to federalize the police. And it's all on the pretext that there's an emergency there. And there is no emergency there. But they are defying him. This is why I brought up about his cabinet. This is why I brought up about his inner circle. They are cementing the deluded belief in his own grandiosity, and it is leading to things like this. I can't stress to you enough how much this is happening and how much we as a people on Labor Day need to pay attention to this and to stand up and to oppose it. And that actually is happening. The polling actually looks good with it. So we're not of the ultra-left school. That's what Mamdani of New York is. And what we're left with now, if you have totalitarianism, that's control over economics and an authoritarian government, and can be mainly concerned with, political power, military power, police, things of this sort. That's authoritarianism. But when you get beyond authoritarianism to totalitarianism, then you're looking at something that pervades everything. And that's what I'm saying is where we are. It's how much sugar, for example, should be in the Coca-Cola. It's about what music gets played at the Kennedy Center. It's about who gets published. It's about what Harvard does. It's about what Columbia does. It's about what Penn does. And by the way, I'm talking here about these higher places of learning, the preeminent ones, some of them, and I would recommend that they should follow President Eisgruber of Princeton, who has not caved in and who is still fighting, even when some of these, a lot of them, really seem to be giving up. But, that's another story. But it remains, it's going on in the background. So in order to extend what we might call totalitarian control over the economy, what do we have? Well, I think we're observing some of it. Honestly, it's a couple of weeks now. But this guy, Professor Sonnenfeld of Yale, he came on O'Donnell, this is a couple of weeks ago, and he says, well, we support the free market. And they do at Yale, I guess. They like the free market at Yale. But they like it in the form of Ayn Rand or Milton Friedman. And I know these names are obscure, so let me just tell you briefly who they are. First, Ayn Rand. She gave us what you could call the gospel of selfishness. She's a Russian emigre. She was a royalist. She believed in the Tsar. She didn't believe in the people. She was a novelist turned philosopher. She built a cult around the idea that altruism was weakness and that greed was virtue. Her books, Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, became sacred texts for CEOs, hedge funders, and every libertarian, really, who wanted to dress up selfishness as a philosophy. Her objectivism preached that the only moral system was one where the individual pursues his own happiness, free from government interference, no matter who's left in the ditch. And politically, she lived in the United States, but she loathed democracy. She adored unfettered capitalism, and her disciples, from Alan Greenspan to Silicon Valley bros, still haunt us. Strip away the mystique, and it's simple. Ayn Rand turned "I've got mine" into a moral crusade. Now let's talk about the other guy. This is Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, University of Chicago economist, the smiling grandfather of neoliberalism, which is, by the way, no liberalism at all. Don't let the soft-spoken tone fool you. His ideas gutted public life. His mantra, the business of business is business. In other words, profit first, society second. He preached deregulation, privatization, tax cuts, policies that spread like wildfire through Reagan, Thatcher, and every trickle-down experiment since. Friedman's free market orthodoxy helped dismantle unions, hollow out public goods, and unleash financial markets that treat people as disposable. To them, he's Uncle Milty, but not because he's cuddly, but because he sold a dangerous fairy tale with a friendly face. Behind that genial grin was the blueprint for inequality on steroids. So, you see, this is the modern genesis of all this. All embodied, as I say, partly embodied in these two personalities. And so at this point, let's take a break. We'll be back. This is Politics by Jake.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting.
Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake. Do you like what you hear right now? Support the real talk then. Go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake right now. Every dollar helps fight the noise. So, all right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back, and welcome to the show this fine Memorial Day, September 1st, 2025. So we were talking about Sonnenfeld. According to Sonnenfeld, we have a form of socialism right now, and you would expect him to say this, or even Maoism. I think he threw some other isms in there as well, but not the free market. Now, look, in my opinion, this is once again important. As you have heard me say, are you going to reject me outright? I wish you would instead say to yourselves, well, I'm going to give space in my mind for the ideas that Jake is talking about, that maybe he could be right. So maybe just do that. So listen to me then when I say the free market, that is mystification. That is crap. There is no free market. Instead, what you are dealing with is a political economy. There's no such thing as economics per se, separate from the actual political condition in which they take place. There isn't any such thing. So the free market, it's a fraud. It's a lie. It's eyewash. It's a market of dupes. And I've gone to some pains earlier in the show, and on Friday too, to talk about the greater fool theory. What's being marketed? The greater fool theory for dupes, for suckers, for the credulous, for the easily led, for, if you will, the rubes. And that means you, that is, if you believe it. And Ayn Rand, she's a monster. Milton Friedman, the perpetrator of a monstrous distortion. Remember that. Economics is the most corrupt of all academic disciplines. And I've seen quite a few of them. There's nothing worse than economics. And why? Because it goes right to the issue of the money in the pockets of the ruling class. And a lot of them know it. They know it very well. So minimum high regard for the economics department, especially compared to economic history. And economic history is perfectly legitimate, but, the free market, it's not. It doesn't have a history, because they don't dare go back and show all the places that have gone to hell looking for the free market. But now, here's the thing. It is true that we're dealing with socialism or Maoism in a certain sense that I'm going to specialize in, I'm going to articulate now. So some people looking at Mamdani, they might say socialism. And AOC, socialism is everywhere, and of course you know the fact that AOC became the face of the Democratic Congress from 2018 to 2020. This was one of the reasons why the Democrats had such big losses in Congress. Because if you come out and you say, I'm a democratic socialist, it means that every Latin American in particular, the ones from Venezuela, the ones from Cuba, the ones from Guatemala, and all those points, They don't want to hear about democratic socialism. It scares the hell out of them. And well, it might. Especially because it's a fraud. It's a fraud in those countries. Those who have been in those countries, they know it's a fraud. And here also, and I've mentioned this several times on the show, it is a fraud. Why? Because they don't propose anything socialist. You've heard me say, I don't know why Bernie calls himself a democratic socialist. I don't know why Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez, who does yeoman service in the fight, calls herself a democratic socialist. There is nothing socialist in either of those two leaders' planks. Nothing. All right, I'm getting a little excited here. I'll try to calm down. Look. Socialism would mean this. Okay, listen to me. It would mean, here, we're going to expropriate this company. We're just going to take it. And we're going to expropriate that company. We're going to take the profits. We're going to create a state sector, which Trump is doing, by the way, and so forth. That would be socialism. But that's not what they're doing. So let me just put it that way, okay? That's not what they're doing. So what do we have? What we have is essentially a kind of a clubby, chummy type gathering, clique now of people around Trump. It's based on a lot of graft, a lot of corruption, a lot of big, billionaire types, tech bros, Wall Street, zombie bankers, hedge fund hyenas. You've heard me reel these names off the list. Private equity, parasites, predators, all this stuff. So forget all this stuff about the free market. Again, it's nonsense. It's crap. I think it's impossible. I mean, how can you be Sonnenfeld and go on MSNBC and say that the free market is an ideal worth regarding? It's not. But what we do actually have now, and I think the idea is, and this is me coming around the bend from where I started, we do have an idea, and it has a name. It's called the Fascist Corporatist State. The Fascist Corporatist State. And what we ought to do today is, among other things, is to point out what this actually means. Now, when you say the corporate, that often throws people for a loop. The fascist corporatist state. Oh, corporatist, you mean corporate? Because people are not they're not used to thinking this way. It doesn't mean that it's corporations. Although in some ways that is what happens. But there's a whole institutional form, corporate. And corporate in this case means corporatism. Corporatism does not mean saying we like corporations, although eventually it does. But the idea is really more like that of the medieval guild, which is composed of an organic unity. They would like to say of the master, the guy who dominates the workshop. Then you have a group of journeymen. Those are the workers. Those are the hired help, the hired hands. And you've got apprentices. These are the trainees. So there's this tripartite unity of the master, and secondarily the journeymen, and then the trainees or the apprentices. That's sort of what the model actually is. And they say, and notice that this is their argument, because the goal of all this is what? And I say this to you, well, momentously, because this is Labor Day, and you need to know this, and I need to be telling you this more than anything. What is the goal of all this? It's to prevent class struggle. It's to prevent strikes. It's to prevent any kind of labor struggle, any kind of labor effort. Instead, to try to improve their lot. When I say their lot, I mean the corporatists. I don't mean the workers. Try to improve their lot. Try to improve their cut. Try to improve their situation in all this. That's considered to be absolutely heretical because the idea is that this tripart division is an organic unity. So watch out for organic when you hear reactionaries and fascists use it in a sentence, as in this case, because for the fascists, the goal is to prevent class struggle or workers' self-assertion, really, in any form at all, for economic purposes, or as we're talking about what happened in Germany in 1920, it was a political general strike. The demands of the general strike, the Kapp Putsch, Kapp and Lüttwitz. You've heard me talk about this. They were not the government of Germany because they made what happened was a coup. Kapp became the prime minister, the chancellor, and Lüttwitz became the commander, the defense minister of all the forces. And they have a bunch of prize scoundrels around them. Again, in that movie, if you want to take a look, it's called The Counter-Revolution. But you've got to struggle through the German to some extent. It's in German. So the fascists, here's the difference. There was some people actually believed in the corporate state. I think if you go back and you look at Leo XIII, De Rerum Novarum, predecessor of the current Pope, he talked about, I think, something that kind of looks like corporatism. He doesn't want class struggle, but his idea is that you have unions, and these are legitimate, and the unions, the legitimate existing unions, can and should cooperate in some kind of shared interest with the executives, the bosses of the corporations, and so forth. So the differences with the fascists, what did Mussolini do? What did Hitler do? What they did was they took the labor representatives of this division that designed to overcome class conflict to say these are going to be part of the big fascist union. That's what they did. They abolished all unions and they said, you're all going to join the big fascist union. That's what they did. That's one of the first things Mussolini did. It dissolved all the actual authentic unions and merged that all into one big fascist union. And that then becomes part of the corporate state. And this goes pretty far. It takes a while, but the fascists seized power in Italy in 1922. They consolidated the dictatorship by 1925, and at this point, let's take a break. And this is Politics by Jake, and we will be back.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/Politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together.
All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And we're talking about, and I know it's kind of theory in a way, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Because and this isn't elitist Jake being better than everybody. I know you have not heard this. I know you do not know this. And I want you to, I want you to watch your baseball. I want you to, go to the games if you can. Watch football. College football is on. I want you to have all of the blessings of liberty and all of the blessings that those who fought and died and shed their blood for the benefits of the laboring class. I want you to enjoy all of that. And hallelujah and God bless the working class. But take some time with me now and learn this as well, because there's something going on behind your back that you or your fathers or your grandfathers or your great-grandfathers, you have never understood. You have never known. So, all right, let's I'll pick up where I left off. The fascists seized power in Italy in 1922, and they consolidated dictatorship by 1925, but they wait until 1939 to actually do this. This is just really, to me, it's interesting. They said, we don't want to have a Chamber of Deputies. The Chamber of Deputies is like the lower house. It would be roughly equivalent to the House of Representatives in the United States. We don't want to have that. We don't want to have a Chamber of Deputies. We don't want to have a legislature which is elected. They said no. And you have this in the United States today. You have people who do not want to see people vote. So they said no. So they said, we're going to have a Chamber of Corporations. And they really said this. And they called this the Italian Camera della Corporazione, Chamber of Corporations. And it becomes the lower house of the Italian legislature. And they get there not by election. See, there's a big difference here. And the big difference is that under corporatism, you are a representative of these groups. And you get to have a voice. But not because of who votes for you. Although it may be that you're elected inside, your group. But you're there because you represent that group. And voting, not so much. Not so much. Usually you're there, because you inherited it, or it could be through intrigue, or bureaucracy, whatever, infighting. But the idea is you're you. You are there to represent the workers, not because they have voted for you, but because of who you are and the functions that you have. In other words, this radically devalues the idea of voting. And you have heard me talk and describe many times that the vote is the sacred and holy franchise in the United States. And this devalues the idea. And believe me that there are people out there that absolutely positively don't want you to vote. And we can see that this is now a pretty common feature of these characters. So 1939, getting back to this, Italy abolishes the Chamber of Deputies. They put in the Chamber of Corporations with business leaders, associations, leaders of business, things like this. And although the business people didn't like this, they never really wanted this. It was a kind of a counterinsurgency that the fascists needed to show the workers that they were doing something for them, that they had appealed to as they were trying to take power, all the way back in 1920, because that's how far this goes back. And from 1939 to 1943, as soon as Mussolini fell, the Chamber of Corporations, they got rid of it. So it came late, didn't last long, and boom, then it was gone. But it was there. There was such a thing. So that's some idea of the fascist corporate state. Now, Hitler, he had something similar, although it was even more half-hearted. The original Nazi program of the early 1920s, it says Germany should become ein Stände, The stand, that means the stand, or a stand, a written stand. And in modern German, for example, Mittelstand, a Mittelstand, which means middle class. Stand today, it's the same thing as class. But what it originally meant is like the French estates. The French estates general, the État general, that's the stand. That is thought of here. And remember, in the French system, and I know I'm hep, you don't know this stuff, it's not what you want to be doing on Labor Day. Please bear with me and listen. In the French system before 1789, there was the first estate, that was the clergy, okay? They had the second estate, and that was the nobility. And then you had the third estate, and that was the bourgeoisie. And the bourgeoisie were just those who had money. And the rest of them, the peasants and the workers, well, they were nowhere. They were nothing. Nowhere. So they didn't get represented at all. In the case of Germany, Hitler again promised a Ständer, Mittelstand, an estate-based government. But it never really went very far in that direction. But here's the idea then. It becomes this. It becomes like a gaggle. This is what you have now. It becomes kind of like informal meeting. It's like Elon Musk showing up at cabinet meetings and standing around with his arms crossed, won't take a seat. This is sort of what you see, right? Like at Trump's inauguration. The billionaires, they show up at the inauguration. The billionaires, they're in the background all the time. Did you watch on January 20th? Do you remember? Why do you think that was? Do you think that that was just a lark? Do you think that that was just a fine little thing because Trump was willing to get them free tickets? No. They were sitting on the stand, and it was very pregnant with meaning. It was like they had taken over the United States, and it was all on display. They're on the inaugural stand. I mean, God, Tim Cook comes to the White House. He's got this crystal plaque or, whatever it was, this piece of exotic glass, or whatever it is. And in order to have a merger, well, you just can't have a merger. You can't go to the Federal Trade Commission under Lena Khan in the Biden administration, who would actually have a rational and public interest-oriented criteria of whether this should happen or not. But now it says, this is the way it is. Like Mary Trump said that Donald said to him, what it is. This is the way it is. It's for Trump. And if it's for Trump, what are you going to do for Trump? What kind of favor are you going to do for it? So, see, it's this kind of world. You understand? You had, Hitler, of course. You had Fatso Goering, he had industrial stuff under his control. Himmler did too. Remember, these are like Hitler's cabinet. These are like of his inner circle. Just like Trump has Witkoff, who could appropriately, I guess, be called Dummkopf, and Stephen Miller, and the various rest of them, Kash Patel, so on and so forth, Kristi Noem. And then you have these other ones. Going back to Hitler, you had Flick, you had Ops, you had Porsche. These were industrialists. You have bankers in particular, and they all gravitate around this National Socialist state. And that's how things are done. And that's what you're looking at forming now. It's forming right before your very eyes. It's why Trump will say out loud in cabinet meetings, I can do whatever I want because this is what's happening. And you are looking at it. Another way to look at it is that the fascist corporate state is a compulsory, and I've talked about this too on some of my videos, a compulsory state-sponsored cartel. It's a cartel economy. It really, the Germans actually, under Hitler, had that. It was a cartel economy. In other words, if you want to be in business, you've got to kowtow to this. You've got to engage with it. You've got to take orders from it. You can, maybe take requests from it. You can do that. But it's a kind of an informal system generally. Do you see now? But the idea is this: it merges. Now, you know, interestingly, which really gives the lie to why it was we were fighting, because why the corporatists were just deathly afraid of the Russians, because with Stalin and the Bolsheviks, it's different. Because with Stalin and the Bolsheviks, they don't foster the billionaires, they kill them. Remember when I talked to you about socialism? Like when you say, okay, we're going to take this company, we're just going to expropriate it, and we're going to take all the money. That's what the Bolsheviks did. When they take over a country, they liquidate the bankers, the industrialists, they kill the ideologues of that place that they take over. Mainly bankers, mainly industrialists too, maybe the leaders of the peasant parties, they all get liquidated and so forth. So that's the one big difference between communism and Nazism, is that under Nazism, the captains of industry, this may be old hat for the 21st century, but in the 19th and 20th and maybe 18th century, you would call these the smokestack barons. The Schlotz, the Behonen of the Ruhr. These are industrial regions in Germany. The Ruhr is an industrial region. Places like this, they get to hobnob with the Nazi elite. They don't get killed. They get to, be part of the gang. So, this is the idea. But it comes down then to a compulsory state-sponsored cartel. And once you have to join it, it is under the decisive influence of the ruling fascist or Nazi party. And they're going to be telling you a lot of what you can do and what you can't do. Now, you can appeal to it. You can appeal to the head of state and all that. But what I'm telling you on this Labor Day, before you go out and you do all the wonderful things that the blessings of labor have given us to do, that people have died for and bled for and suffered for, broken limbs and damage to internal organs. And I'm just not kidding. I couldn't be more serious. Before you go do that, listen to me when I tell you, that's what we have. We're now headed full speed into the world of the fascist corporate state. And it doesn't work well. In other words, it's not like this, was any kind of a solution. It was mainly about control. So you could avoid strikes. So you could avoid lockouts. Well, I take that back. Maybe not those. But you can avoid strikes. And you get the idea. And I hope you do. And this is Politics by Jake. Have a good Labor Day. And we'll see you next Friday. Bye-bye now.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. This is Jake, here to tell you the world is on fire, only you're not being told who actually lit the match. Politics by Jake, Mondays and Fridays at 7 a.m. on KCAA.